Okay, hi everyone. My name's Gina. I'm the VP of Career Development for GSA, and just want to say thank you to everyone for coming to our seminar today. It's been a very stressful week. Also, thank you for everyone. I see a lot of familiar people that have been attending all the seminars in the series. So yeah, this semester I really wanted to focus on career in academia and highlight maybe the challenges, the positives and negatives. And in order to learn about that, I wanted to reach out to all of the new, fresh PIs here at Jefferson. And I think that it's important to understand all of their unique experiences that brought them to where they are now. And then, of course, this is beneficial to us graduate students, especially older graduate students, younger graduate students for, maybe we'll have to go through this eventually if we choose to stay in academia. So today we have Dr. Veronica Rodriguez Bravo and Dr. Sara Meyer, who are in the Department of Cancer Biology. And I would like to introduce Dr. Veronica Rodriguez Bravo, who's going to be speaking first. And if anyone has any questions, let's say about their research directly, you can ask after the presentation. But I think previously it works best if we just go through the next presentation, and then we can save all the discussion for the end of the seminar. I think we have like 15, 20 minutes. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you both of you for participating.
All right, should I share the screen? Should I go?
Yes, please.
All right. Can you see it?
Yes.
All right. Can you hear me well? I guess so. All right.
Yes.
So thank you, Gina and the GSA, for inviting me to participate today with Dr. Meyer to talk about our career path. And I really made this to be helpful for you. So I'm not going to be talking a lot about my research, but more about things that I think may resonate with you and help you along the way, or make you think about how you can approach your career in the future. So it's going to be a very personal thing. So the first slide is scientific. So this is what we do in my lab. We study genome function and stability regulation, and how these mechanisms are deregulated in cancer, with special focus in chromosomal stability and nuclear pore complexes. So this is my current lab. I'm assistant professor of cancer biology, and my lab is in the BLSB 10th floor. Pei Yao is a postdoc in the lab, Brittany Dutal, a PhD student from the GGCB program, Christina, a technician, and Frank Duan was a medical student coming to the lab to do some research, and we're going to have a different medical student this year also starting. So the big question is, how did I get here? And I'm going to try to explain you like a roadmap of what took me to research first, and the different places I have been until I landed here in Philadelphia. So I thought the map was the perfect way to do this, kind of like an Indiana Jones movie. So I'm gonna share with you my personal journey in scientific research. And we're gonna go to Spain first, because I'm originally from there. My parents were born in the south of Spain. And for those of you who don't know, Spain is in Europe, and the south of Spain, there is a place called Extremadura, and a little village. My parents are from Ciruela. If you have seen Gladiator, you know where Gladiator is from. It's from a place where there is a big Roman city that was settled there back in the Roman Empire. So basically that recapitulates really well the look of where my parents are from. So we are from a working class family. My parents are from a place where there is a lot of agriculture, very humble origins. They were never going to college. So my sister and I were the first generation to go to college. So we didn't have any healthcare or scientific research connection whatsoever. So that was not my entry point to scientific research. So in the 1970s, my parents moved to Barcelona in the north. I'm sure you know more about Barcelona than the south of Spain. And this is one of the main cities in Spain, and it's close to the Mediterranean Sea. And this is where I was born, where I grew up, and where I attended college. I went to Barcelona University and studied biology. And I'm not going to discuss the doubts that I encountered before really going for biology in my life. If anybody has questions, I'm happy to disclose. But when I decided to study biology, I had a very clear idea that I wanted to study cancer. And maybe because I knew cases of relatives that had already had cancer, back then there was a very big black box, scary box about what cancer is and a lot of unknowns. So I really wanted to understand it. So I went to study biology with a really idea of I want to study cancer. And then I did my PhD in pathology and cell biology in the same university. And that was from 2002 to 2007, so around 5 years. I studied DNA replication checkpoints in human cells, comparing normal and tumor cells. And this is a picture that now when I look at it, I realize that, wow, we were all women. I didn't realize back then, and probably that has shaped a little bit the way I approach science myself. So she was my advisor, Neus Igel. It means snow in Catalan, her name. And one of the first things I would say when you pick a lab, and most of you already picked a lab or ready to do, one of the things that I think are important is to find a role model. And for me, many ways, Neus has been a role model, even without me knowing at the beginning, because that was my first experience with research. The other thing I would say, pick a topic that you love. I really wanted to study cancer biology, and I really was fascinated by cell cycle when I was in college. So that was like a very natural choice for me to go to a cell cycle lab. The other thing I would say, and I'm going to be saying these thoughts out loud that I think are important take-home messages from different stages in time of my career. Make mistakes often. Sorry. It doesn't matter how many you make. Actually, it would be a good thing to make a lot of mistakes. The more mistakes you make, the closer you are to the real answer to something. So you gotta allow yourself to make mistakes. And obviously, one of the things that I would say is you have to work hard. And that I would say outcompetes everything else. I have seen many people that were super talented, way smarter than many others. But if you don't put some effort on it and you don't really work hard, it doesn't work, because you need to make a lot of mistakes to get to the point you want to get. So sometimes you may think that you are not ready, that you're not prepared, that you're not smart enough. I was one of those people that thought that may not be fitted for scientific research, but I did work very hard. And I think that helped me to actually overcome many other limitations that I may have had, right? So always try to put a lot of hours on what you do. And be stubborn, right? I like this sentence by Winston Churchill that if at first you don't succeed, try, and try again. And really there is no other way. We have to be faced by the reality that this is what we do in research, right? We have to continue and go after different failures and recover after that. It's okay to have doubts, not only about your research, but also about yourself. And I did experience that, and I will be happy to share more of those feelings if anybody is interested. I think it's part of the process, as you actually believe in yourself, and that comes with the PhD and as you move forward. Do not be too hard on yourself because of that. So you will get there eventually, and when you look back, you will realize, wow, I was really hard on myself. I wasn't doing that bad, right? So try to encourage yourself also and pat yourself in the back sometimes. And yes, you need a paper too, especially if you want to have a long-term career in academia. So you really need something productive. And also something very important is you have to have fun too. So that is the time to actually work hard, but also have fun, because you can dedicate all your time to your project. You don't have any other distraction, just to focus on your research. And in the future, don't think that things are going to get easier. You get all the things that are important in your life, and you have to deal with grant applications. Things become more serious. So now is the moment to have fun. And these are just a couple of slides of that time, and just to illustrate that this is what I was thinking, what I was working on, the checkpoints in cell cycle. And this is actually a slide from my thesis presentation, which illustrates one of the experiments we were doing, looking at histone H3 phosphorylation to detect cells going into mitosis, and how cells that had different pathways that prevented to go into mitosis with DNA and replicated or with damaged DNA. And if you push them to go by inhibiting, for example, CHAC1 and P38 pathways, they have this aberrant entry into mitosis that actually leads to cell death. All right, so then I decided to go for a postdoc, and my first place was in the Netherlands, in Utrecht. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's really close to Amsterdam. It's a university city. That was a short postdoc for me for personal reasons. I wanted to relocate to the United States, and I started there studying DNA damage checkpoints in the René Medema lab. And he actually helped me a lot to find my next position in New York. So basically, I spent a year in Utrecht, and then I moved to New York in 2008. And Here is where I did my really long postdoc period. It was almost 7 years, and I spent a long time in the laboratory of Prasad Jalepalia Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. And there I focused a lot in studying mitotic checkpoint, nuclear pore biology, and chromosomal instability. And I would highlight from this time, again, pick something that you like and love. You're going to spend a lot of time working on this. So there has to be something either technically or the science behind it or the applicability of it, something that really, really you like, because this is going to be your life for the next 4 or 5 years. Pick an advisor who can teach you something new. That was very valuable for me. Prasad had a strong knowledge in molecular biology and genome editing, not using CRISPR. We were using homologous recombination to make conditional knockouts. So I knew I wanted to learn that and become very proficient on that to be able to manipulate the genome of cells. And also I was fascinated by cell division from the beginning. So I thought it was the perfect lab for me. Here, you have to work harder than ever if you really want to stay in academia. And this is the moment I would say to become a professional and expert on something. When you're in your PhD, you kind of still change topics. It's fine to change from the PhD to your postdoc. Actually, it may be even good because you get a lot of different backgrounds that then you can use in the future. When you're in your postdoc, that pretty much may define what you're going to do in the future if you're staying in academia. So think about that that really is, you can still change, but it's going to be harder because that's what they're going to look in you for your faculty positions. So you have to start, if you can, start thinking about your future research topic. I didn't do that, but everybody tells you that start thinking early. You have to plan what is going to be your research focus. I wasn't so sure about what I was going to be doing. I just knew that I liked what I was doing. So I don't know if I thought about it a lot. The connections part, that's always important. So the more people you know, the more people can help you along the way in terms of recommending you to apply to places, writing letters for you, just career advice. I wasn't particularly good at making connections. I was more like a laboratory rat. I was always in the lab, focused on the experiments, and I didn't have a lot of time to spend knowing other people or PIs. It's intimidating to talk to PIs, but I would encourage that because those are the people that know others and know other labs, and they can help you a lot. So if you have time, invest a little bit on connection. That's not going to hurt. It's going to help you in the long run. And basically, you have to at least publish one good paper if you want to make it to have a faculty position, if no more. These are some of the things that we studied in my postdoc. We kind of discovered the novel roles for a mitotic protein that localizes to nuclear pores. In mitosis, it goes to centromeres. And basically what we saw is that if you manipulate these cells and make conditional knockouts of this particular protein, the gene, you have problems in cell division. They accumulate micronuclei and chromosome segregation. And the same thing happens when this particular protein is engineered so it cannot go to the nuclear pore. And then we figure out the mechanism of how this was happening. So this is the technology that I wanted to learn, applied to something that I really loved. All right, so then I finished my postdoc there, and I wanted to be a PI. So now what? And of course, you have to land the job market. This is a really stressful time. I would say it's worse than applying for a postdoc or for a PhD position, because you have to write a lot of your research plan and submit it to places you don't know if they are even going to consider you. So you have to go through these uncertain times that usually are long. It's more than a year in many cases. If you're lucky, you get interviews, and you have to have a lot of patience, actually. Indeed, I would say that during this time, I got enrolled in the graphic design course to actually try to decompress a little. So I got a little degree in graphic design that helped me to deal with that situation. I guess in a way I was trying to tell to myself that it's okay if you don't land in a faculty job, you can still do other things. It ended up working, so I got an offer to start my lab at Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York. I started my lab there in November 2015. And basically that opens a new moment in life in which I don't think we are ever prepared for, because you have to switch from thinking about a postdoc to basically be a manager. And nobody really trains you for that. and not even today, I would say. I was not trained for that, but I don't think students and postdocs are trained these days for being a manager. What it means is you have to recruit people, and you have to write grants, and you have to deal with the organization of the lab. At the same time, projects, you also are doing experiments because you are your first postdoc. So everything happens at the same time, and you don't have that experience. It's a moment a little bit difficult in that regard. That is a lot going on. And if that wasn't enough, I also had twin daughters. The first year I was starting my lab, they were born in July 2016 in New York. And now I remember it like a very fantastic time. But looking back, I think that maybe it was a little crazy to do it the first year of my faculty position. Then I got some grants that were very important, so things were starting to work well. I started recruiting some people, and then we got an offer, me and my husband, to actually relocate to Philadelphia, to Thomas Jefferson. So I started the whole process again of establishing a new lab, and that happened in December 2017. So if I have experience with something, maybe it's with starting labs from scratch. So we moved here, and I started creating a new group here, and we have been establishing our research. And oops, I had baby number 3 in June 2020. So that's just to say there is not a perfect way of a career path, and you can do anything you want. If you want to have family, it's possible. I'm not saying it easy, but it's possible. If you don't want to have a family, that's also fine. So don't think that is one stereotype of what you have to do to be successful and be in science and have a lab. There are different, I know a lot of people with different career backgrounds and career path, and there's not just one only way to do that. So again, just to recapitulate and go back to the beginning, this is my lab. This is the main projects we have, dealing with nuclear pore biology and also cell division. And then some of the latest celebrations we had with our masks on, of course, in the lab. And just as a really brief summary, we study chromosomal instability adaptation, how cancer cells that are very aggressive actually can tolerate high levels of chromosomal aberrations. What are the pathways that they put in place to survive? And we study also the regulation of nuclear pores. Also, they have the regulated status in advanced prostate cancer, for example, as an example. And we study how this affects aggressiveness and what are the vulnerabilities that we can find in these cells, and study the mechanism. We are studying prostate cancer as a model, and we use tissue culture. We study the genome, we do the genomics, proteomics, and genetics. We manipulate the genome of the cells. We do a lot of cell life imaging, and we are also trying to implement tumor samples and preclinical models in our work. And if I have time, I had some left, some thoughts towards the end to kind of encourage you, and what are things that I think I would have loved to hear during my path. As I said, there is no one right or wrong way or path to be successful in science. If you love science, you belong, so you just find your own way. So don't get discouraged because, I don't do the things the same way other people have done it. It doesn't matter. You just follow your own path. You really never stop learning, so be ready for that feeling. Don't think I never had the feeling of knowing something. I always feel that the more I do, the less I know, in a way. So embrace that feeling, because that's going to be with you for a long time. I like a paper that is called The Importance of Stupidity in Scientific Research. That is worth a read. I can send you the link if you want to read it. It basically deals with that feeling of that you always feel stupid. If you don't feel stupid most of the time, you're doing something wrong, because you're challenging yourself with your experiments and your project. If everything is easy, something is not quite right in scientific research. You may be the only one thinking 100% on a scientific problem, so own it and have fun with it. And we should think we are really fortunate to dedicate our lives to scientific research. We're paid for it. Yes, it can be hard sometimes, but we get to go to lab every day and potentially make discoveries every day. And I find that sometimes we kind of have to remember that. I have another read that I can send to you in an email if you want, that is kind of interesting and nice. That it's called The Real Final Exam by Donald Scoffey, a professor of Johns Hopkins University. And he has like a serial of different points of what is important in a PhD. And basically finishes with, if you are lucky, the world will pay you a modest salary for what you consider your hobby. And you in return will be contributing to some important answers for our present and future society. So good luck in your careers. And so keep calm and pipe it on. Every champion was once a contender who refused to give up. These are some of the things that I think I would like to hear. And don't let anyone tell you that you can do something. Make your own victories and make your own mistakes. And finally, one of my favorite movies from Kung Fu Panda. Yesterday's history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is the gift. And that is why it's called the present. So be present and make the most of what you're doing right now. And don't project too much into the future, because you have to also enjoy what you're doing now in order to move on. And with that, I think I didn't go over time. And I'm happy to discuss anything at the end if we want to move into Dr. Meyer presentation. Thank you very much.
I think we all needed to hear that today, so thank you.
All right. I wasn't sure if that would be helpful, but I didn't want to talk about myself only in research terms.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, Kung Fu Panda is also my favorite movie, so.
Oh, really? Okay, good. I don't feel a freak now.
Does anyone have any direct questions for Veronica about her research? First year students? I know if you're still looking for research labs. Anyone else curious for cool work? No?
You can also send me an email if you're shy. And we can move on to the next, maybe at the end people will have more inspiration. Should I stop sharing now? I stop?
Yeah, so Dr.
All
Meyer,
right.
you're up next.
Sure, happy to go. You know, it's crazy, Veronica. It's like we must share the same mind, because my presentation has almost essentially the exact same theme as yours. It's not really focused on science. It's more focused on what was my specific journey. That I always find it's helpful to share with trainees, because just like Veronica, you know, my journey was not exactly the most atypical or the most typical journey. It was in fact a little atypical. So hopefully you'll enjoy this. So my PhD career journey has been riddled with all kinds of options, as all of your guys's are. And I constantly feel like at every step, every week even, sometimes there's more questions like, which PhD program do I pick? Which PhD lab do I pick? Which postdoc lab or project do I pick? Do I want to go into academia or industry? And how do I get funding? And do I need funding? And how do I get a faculty interview? And which institution? And what about family and work-life balance? Does that even exist? So all of these questions, you know, bounce around in all of our heads all the time. And it can create a lot of anxiety and stress in you know, having a PhD as a career. And amazingly though, as you keep just moving forward and keep progressing forward, if you're really, really passionate about science, it's going to fall into place, believe it or not. So my career path in retrospect is how I'm going to give this presentation. And really it was kind of a twisty road. And I'm going to use my dog as part of an example of me in the journey, because I got her when she was just a puppy and I was a graduate student in 2006. And so here she is as a little puppy, and me as a PhD student at the beginning of my scientific journey. And so some things to consider when selecting a PhD or an MD PhD program, which all of you guys have done, but some of this goes into how to select a lab and things like that, is first of all, you have to get the program acceptance, which you have, so congratulations. Then you have to decide what scientific topic you're most interested in. As you can see my dog over here wearing this breast cancer barking for a cure bandana, I was very passionate at the time about breast cancer research. Choose a faculty with expertise in the scientific topic that you are really passionate about, and identify whether or not this person is going to be a great mentor. Mentorship is extremely important in every level of your career. Even when you become a faculty, mentorship is still very, very, very important. Does the curriculum that they offer and supplemental training, don't forget, like we just talked about, people here undergoing cryo-EM training and other kinds of training that you need in order to execute experiments that might be relevant to your research, is really important that those things exist at your institution, which Jefferson has all of those things. What are the past and current students working on? And what have they published? What are they working on? Is it something that's really appealing? Do they do well? Do they get papers? That's important. As Veronica mentioned, and I'll reflect on too, you have to have fun and do something that you're really passionate about, but you also have to show productivity. So you do have to get your name out there on a paper. What are the requirements for graduation? This is something to ask if you haven't already, in particular, even rotating students. Does your mentor have graduation requirements which are independent from that of your graduate program? So in my case, my graduate mentor said, you have to have 2 first author manuscripts in order to graduate. And in fact, that's my personal goal for all of my graduate students too, and their requirement is to have 2 first author publications to graduate. Where do the graduates go after they leave the lab? And then, of course, is the institution and the department that you're going to be in really support graduate education? And I think that that's clear that we do that here at Jefferson. And I got my PhD in 2009 from the University of Cincinnati. And so during my PhD, though, I did have a bit of a fork in the road, and you'll see I have a couple of these come up at every step in my journey. And so my PhD mentor that I first selected to do my thesis in, she decided to move to another institution. She picked up and went to the University of Chicago. And so I had a decision. I could either move with her or I could try to stay in Cincinnati and switch to a lab with my collaborator. And I chose to stay in Cincinnati and switch to my collaborator's lab. And I still maintained a really good relationship with my past mentor. In fact, we still meet at national conferences and have coffee together all the time. And I just served on NI study section with my other mentors. So it's been really fun. And I value them both greatly. So here's my first mentor, Kathy, that moved to Chicago. She's now essentially the associate director of communications for the Cancer Center in Chicago. And here's Susan Waltz, my mentor from the University of Cincinnati. And one of my really close friends that she and I were in graduate school together and graduated together, Megan, who's actually went to Eli Lilly for her postdoc and ended up getting a law degree and actually doing patent law now at Eli Lilly. So it's really interesting that she and I both had the same research training and went in 2 completely different directions. But so the pros for my PhD, as I've been reflecting back, is one thing that was kind of hard, and I think is hard for a lot of students, is to learn to not take criticism personally. There's a lot of that happens, and it's a lot of just growth and learning to accept that you don't always have to have all of the answers all of the time, and it's really just to help make you better. I also learned that to gain confidence in my science and my results, and as Veronica pointed out, it's okay to have doubts, but you should also be confident that the result that you're producing is a real result, whether there's a technical issue or not aside, a result is a result. I also gained depth of knowledge and skills in solid tumors, which was great. I had 3 first author publications and a middle author paper. I was supported on T32s. As I mentioned, I gained long-term friendships. And at the end of my PhD, I realized that genes and proteins inside the tumor aren't the whole answer. And that led to actually a new interest in switching fields for my postdoc, which I'll talk about in a minute. So the cons were that it's really hard, of course, to adjust to a lifestyle with yourself and your family for the really, really long hours that you dedicate into the lab. And we work super, super hard. And even people in science, they tend to have a really hard time grasping that, whether it's your mom or your dad or your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever. It takes a lot of constant communication to really get into a good work-life balance. And I struggled with that even still today, for sure. One con that I felt like is self-reflecting on myself was that I didn't have a top tier publication yet at this point. And so I think that that's something that we all judge ourselves on is, you know, how high impacted papers do you have, and trying to shoot for the moon on the first attempt. I didn't really make it there, and some people do. And, you know, I'm an example sitting here that says, well, just keep trying. if you are really passionate about this career, you can do it and you'll make it. So here's my dog. She's well trained now after getting her PhD. You can see she works long hours on the living room floor with her notebook, recording data off of plates, and doing a postdoc. So in order to select a postdoc mentor, what do I feel is important? Scientific topic, absolutely. So I mentioned that I was interested in switching gears a little bit, and I did that. I went to a lab that studied microRNA. That was what I was really interested in learning as a postdoc that I didn't work on before as a graduate student. And also I switched completely from solid tumors to liquid tumors and wanted to learn more about immunology and the tumor microenvironment. And so for the first couple of years in that lab, especially going to new scientific meetings that were, outside of solid tumor world, I felt kind of lost. But in the end, I think it was a huge success and worth the learning curve. I love hematology and immunology and hematologic malignancies, and I still study it today, as I'll show you a slide of our current work later. Mentorship, track record, and dedication is really, really important. So is this mentor dedicated to developing postdocs, or are you going to be competed against other postdocs for a name slot on a paper? Are you going to be allowed to take work with you and develop your own ideas even within that mentor's lab, and will you be supported with your own ideas? Publications, certainly the impact and the quantity matter at this point. So as Veronica mentioned, it's time to step it up. You think graduate school is hard at postdoc time. This is really the best time that you will ever have, because you have so much experience. You're blowing through all of your mentors' cash, generating all of this data, getting all of these papers, and then you get all the credit for it, and it's super fun. It's just the best time. Funding, yours and your mentors, is super important. Now's the time to start really, really trying to apply for things and get at least one independent fellowship. It's a huge learning process to write a grant and to actually have one that's funded to give you a template for what is a solid grant look like. Institution and department support and career development opportunities are really crucial, and I would say not even within the institution, but other institutions surrounding that offer things you should try to participate in. Other things to consider: where do PhDs go after leaving the mentor's lab? I kind of took a little bit of a risk because the mentor that I selected had only had one postdoc that went on to do something independently and join pharmaceutical company. And I knew the second that I joined that lab that I wanted to have my own lab someday. And that was another strength that I think that I did, was I made it crystal clear what my end goal was from day one when I started my postdoc. And so from day one, we worked toward that goal. Geography sometimes matters, but sometimes doesn't matter. At this point, you're kind of more progressed in your life and your lifestyle and your family, and you may have restrictions based on that for the geography that you can do your work in. And there are great institutions everywhere, so you'll have to find one if you are geographically confined. Personal finances could certainly play a role, and spouse and family can play a role. And these are just things that, can all be worked out. And so my choice was, where do I go? Do I want to stay in Ohio and maybe work in Children's Hospital in Cincinnati, or at the University of Cincinnati, or anywhere else? So I actually interviewed at Children's Hospital in Cincinnati. I interviewed at Duke. I interviewed at NIH. I interviewed at Vanderbilt. And ultimately what happened was we couldn't sell our house. I was interviewing for postdocs in 2008, and I joined my postdoc lab at Cincinnati Children's at the end of 2009. And ultimately we couldn't sell our home in time to make a move to transition to any other location. And so I was kind of geographically restricted, but at the same time, there was a lab that I was extremely excited to join. So I was very happy to do so. So here are some pictures from my postdoc with my fellow lab mates. It was a very young, very diverse lab, but Andre and I were the two senior postdocs. We started at the same time and had a lot of fun. Along the way, I got to mentor some other students. This was probably one of my most talented students, believe it or not, who was in high school at the time. And here's my mentor, Lee. And I was really fortunate to take part in a really awesome hematology translational research training program, which was super fun, and it was held in Milan. And I got to meet great people, meet new friends, identify new mentors in the field. And I think that the people in science are actually part of what makes it fun, in addition to just the excitement of finding new things and the basic knowledge that eventually someday your work could maybe help somebody. So the pros that I reflect from my postdoc is that, taking big risks that's the time. Do it. Go for it. Take big risks. Don't be afraid. Just do it. Mentor and train students. It's helpful, but it's nothing like having to run a lab and manage a team of your own. So while it helps to prepare you for what's coming next, it's not the same. I switched fields, which I feel like was a positive in my career path. I got, again, another 3 first author papers and 2 co-author papers. I got a funded fellowship grant, and I was also supported on a T32, and I mentioned that other translational training program. I actually, toward the end of my postdoc, because like Veronica, I was a postdoc for 7 years as well, from 2009 to 2016. I actually wrote an R01 with my mentor, and we got that R01 funded. This was huge for me in learning how to write an R01 grant. It was a really hard experience, but it made the process for me when I started my own lab so much more, I would say, not easy, but at least I had sort of a platform or a template for what I knew I needed to do. Networking was one thing that I really, really, really stepped up big time in my postdoc. I think that this is key, at least for me, in finding a faculty position after my postdoc. I was able to identify several outside mentors that still mentor me today in my research field, which I think is phenomenal. These people are also people who are going to write you letters of recommendation, letters of support. You may want to collaborate with them. Networking is just critical. Gaining field recognition for your research. Try to submit your work for poster presentation, for platform presentation. Stick your neck out there, volunteer to present at things, and also stick your hand out at meetings and meet people. This is, again, how you get recognized in the field. This is how you get a faculty position. Publications and field recognition for your work. So cons, I didn't have a K99 or Career Development Award at the end of my postdoc when I was trying to look for a faculty position. And at the time, people thought that that was like basically a minimal requirement in order to get your foot in the door to have an interview anywhere. And so while it's seen as a negative, in fact, actually, it might end up not being so much of a negative, particularly because I was able to get an R01 relatively quickly. As a junior faculty now, there's lots of mechanisms for career development awards. Once you actually have your faculty position, the door really opens up for a lot of mechanisms, from foundations, but also the NIH and the NCI and other institutes recognize new faculty that have never been given an NIH award before. And so that actually does kind of help you get your first award. Again, no cell science or nature papers. So I realize that people think that this is like what gets you the job, but I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with that. I think it's the plan and your potential and the field recognition for what you've done that's the most important. So here's my dog again. She's still hanging in there, getting a little gray in the muzzle. I don't turn gray, I dye my hair, so you would never know. PhD career journey continues to a PI position. So where to go and how do I get to the next level? I really wanted to go somewhere else outside of Ohio. I applied to and got interviews at Northwestern, Miami, City of Hope, Indiana, Cleveland Clinic, and Jefferson. And ultimately, what were the criteria that I used that were most important for picking a faculty job, and what did I think helped me get those interviews is what I would like to talk about. So how do you know what jobs are out there? Well, there's websites for job postings, and people are now putting job postings on social media, but this is where your network really comes into play. From 2 years prior to me actually doing any interviews, every meeting that I went to, I was shaking people's hands and I was telling them, hey, I'm going to be ready to go on the job market soon. This is where my research is at. This is what I want to do in the future. Are you guys hiring? Are you currently hiring? Are you planning to hire? Does my work fit into the scope of somebody that you want to hire in your institution or in your department? I got a lot of feedback, and that was actually how I got all of my interviews, was from in-person networking, just asking people, do you have open positions, and can I apply? Would you be interested in interviewing me? So what do you need to do for this interview? You have to have a 5-year research plan, and that 5-year research plan is essentially your first R01 or grant application. So they really go hand in hand. You need a research plan and you need a funding plan, and they go hand in hand. That's very key. And then the interview itself, what do you look for when you go on a faculty interview? You look for mentorship. That was number 1 on my list. Mentorship and commitment to junior faculty. That was, to me, an outstanding feature about Jefferson, was the faculty that were here that were really committed to mentoring junior faculty, which I thought was phenomenal, and it's something that is quite frankly overlooked at some places. Institutional support, facilities, and resources. You should be able to transparently see and discuss all of these things in your interview. Do you like the colleagues and the environment there? And are they going to give you the time to do your research? In other words, are you going to have other extra administrative requirements that are going to really prevent you from having the protected time, especially as a junior faculty, to set up a lab, to recruit new people, to get experiments up and running, to write your first grant, to manage the people in the lab? You really have to have your 100% of your time dedicated to that. And so I've been at Jefferson since 2016, so 4 years. Here's my lab on Zoom. My lab is in Blumley on the 3rd floor. So what are some of the reflections that I thought were good things that I did well? Looking for my first faculty position, as I mentioned, I leveraged my network more than a year before I went on the job market. I immediately established a mentor team, and we met often. I met with my primary mentor here at Jefferson once a week. The first hire is going to be for you an entry-level technician. Everyone thinks when they set up a lab that they want that all-star person who has the identical hands and skills as they do to come in and immediately hit the ground running and run the lab. But you know, the reality is that those are not the people that apply to your lab. It's the people that are just graduating, that want to actually try some bench work maybe before going to graduate school or something like that. These are the ones that you're going to hire. And as long as they're extremely motivated and excited, you can train anybody. I also applied and funded my first R01 within the first 2 years of setting up my lab. And this was a really critical thing to do, and I think very, very important, because it really helps set the tone not only for you in the field at large, but then you have secured funding to then take on graduate students, which are, as you guys know, a really important contribution to all research labs. Also diversifying projects. So we have several projects in the lab, not just like one main focus, but several. And again, continuing to network for collaborators and mentors. I always do that. You know, cons when you set up the lab is that silly things that were working easily before you set up your lab and while you were a postdoc suddenly stop working. And this is actually true anytime you move a lab from one location to another. Silly things just suddenly stop working, and it's like you have to go back and reinvent the wheel, and it's really annoying, but everybody goes through it and it's kind of goofy, but it happens. good postdocs are extremely hard to get, and I was patient and really lucky to find a really great postdoc. They're very important as leaders in the lab. As I said, as a postdoc myself, I mentored trainees and graduate students, but it's nice to have people at all different levels and a team that works together to help each other out. And there's definitely, as Veronica mentioned, you don't get trained to be a manager, especially a manager of people. And so the personnel challenges is a learning curve about different things that you encounter with managing people in a lab. So this is the only science that I'm going to show, and it's of course not even science, it's just a cartoon about what my lab works on. And so we work from inside the cell out and back. We study epigenetics in the lab. We're really interested in mutant epigenetic modifiers in AML. They're some of the most commonly mutated genes in AML, and they're acquired early in disease progression, and they correspond with a really poor prognosis. And the mechanisms of how they regulate leukemogenesis isn't really clear, and it's very, very complex. We're actually interested in how epigenetic regulation of DNA methylation interacts with and crosstalks with other epigenetic regulations at histone levels, and how this affects gene expression. And we're interested in innate immune signaling in our acute myeloid leukemia cells that we study in the lab. AML cells should have been a normal myeloid immune cell that would fight bacteria and viruses and such. But the leukemic mutations have hijacked that ability and blocked the differentiation for these cells to become normal. And so when that happens, then you kind of get a mishmash of a barren expression of like sort of normal myeloidish stuff mixed with leukemia stuff in the same cell. And so we're trying to dig through that and see what kind of remaining immune function is left on the cell. Do these cells communicate with the environment of other non-leukemic cells in people and in mice? And how can we leverage this therapeutically to treat the disease? We're also still interested in studying microRNA as well, and we have some connections about how microRNA not only interfere with and sort of modulate the immune system, and the immune response and leukemiogenesis, but also how they're directly epigenetically regulated. And so to summarize, I would say it's really important to follow your passion. Persistence pays off. You have to persist. You have to overcome. You can't let your fear get in the way of taking risks and really just doing something new and fantastic. You need mentors at all stages. Be proactive. Go after what you want and network and leverage your network. So that's the end of my slideshow, and I'm happy to have a discussion now if we want to get started with that.
Thank you. That was great. I really appreciate all of the honesty that you guys were kind of talking about in terms of like all the advice, especially going like through each step, because I feel like that's important to talk about. Anyone have any questions? John, I know you have one.
So how did you guys start forming I think both of you guys mentioned having a mentor team. So how did you guys both go about forming those when you guys first started?
Are you referring to the faculty stage or
I guess
any
like
point?
at all stages, because like, like my PI by default is my mentor, but if I move on to my postdoc, how do I just find faculty? Like, do I just go up and ask them to be my mentor, or?
I would say that that's a very good question. And I probably wasn't particularly good on identifying other mentors than my direct advisor, because nobody told me that you should do that, right? But now looking back, I would say you don't really have to plan very well about it. You just try to identify people you feel good about, that either because you like what they do or you feel that you can communicate well with them. Just go ask something, send an email. Now we cannot go to visit places not on labs, but just show interest in something. I would like to talk to you about this, and can you help me? People would love to, if people approaches to me to ask for advice, I would love to give my experience, my advice on something. usually that never happens. I think because we are all intimidated to reach out, but you will be surprised that how easy it is to get feedback when you approach other PIs. But as students, I think we never get
a lot of times,
trained for that.
a lot of times too, I find that like if you're in a meeting, like a group meeting, or even if you're at a poster giving a presentation and somebody comes up and talks to you, if they are of the mentoring type that really want to help you out, they'll offer help. You know, they'll say, oh, we have this common interest, or I know you're a mentor, and you know, I really wish you good luck and want to help you and this and that and the other. You'd be surprised the hints that people drop if they are really interested in you and your work and would want to help you. And those are the kind of people that you could just kind of go up to and try to talk to them a little bit more to learn about what do they work on and how can you use them best for the things that you need. So you don't necessarily have to always use the same person for the same thing. Sometimes sometimes you identify people that are experts at a disease thing that you want, you know, help with understanding like clinical aspects of something. If you're a PhD scientist and you might have a clinician that you want to really help be part of your go-to person or your mentor structure that can help you with those clinical pieces. Or maybe you have somebody that's like a bioinformatician that you find communicated really well with you on a project, and therefore you keep going back to that person when you have questions that you want help with. And then suddenly, naturally, you end up with this team of people that you can get help from, and they become naturally mentors. But you can actually formalize it and say, would you be willing to mentor me? Can I please send you my paper, or can I please send you my grant, and would you give me feedback? People will do that.
And I have one specific kind of situation with me, that somebody that I didn't anticipate to be a mentor actually became one in a career transition from the postdoc to the faculty. There was a junior faculty who joined my institution at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and she used to have lab meetings with us. And I started working with her, and now I realized how much she informed me about what was about to come. So she ended up being one of my mentors in one of my career development awards, because I asked her to be together with my mentor in the mentorship team. And actually I think NIH loved that, because she was in the first 2-3 years of her faculty position, and she was giving me all this knowledge, and actually was really useful. So you can identify people that are about to do something that you may do in the next 2 years or 3, and stick to them kind of. And if there is so much, you know, and just try to not be intimidated, and reach out to people you think that may be helpful, you know. Usually it's very strange that you get a no as an answer, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So I have
more questions.
So you two are the first like all women's panel that GSA like invited for this event, and I was kind of curious about, you know, on the topic of women in STEM. Well, I haven't really experienced any sort of discrimination like thus far at the PhD student level. Have you guys experienced anything? It could be like transitioning into a postdoc or like interviewing for jobs, but any sort of, I don't know, any sort of experiences by being a woman in science, applying for these positions.
I don't want to tell the truth.
I have some thoughts too, but I don't want to scare people, but I would say I was not aware of this at the beginning, because you're not born with these limitations, right? The world, the sky is the limit, right? So when I was in my PhD, there were a lot of women around me, and I even thought about any differences. And then you go move on, and every time you move on, you see around that many people are behind, and the ones that are stepping up in leadership positions are not the majority of the women that you usually were, you know, working with. Or there is a lot of women in PhDs, but then suddenly they disappear as you move on. And I could see in my postdoc, when they had interviews for people, the seminars, most of them, the majority of the time, they were guys. And I didn't realize, and then over time, I started putting those pieces together and say, wow, something is going on, right? The majority of women are not reaching to this stage of majorly going into faculty positions and starting their own labs. And then I realized that I couldn't mention like a specific thing that occurred to me, but just the general environment that actually tells you there is a difference. And we still are working through this, right? The representation, it's not the same. I don't know, you, Sarah, you have something more specific to say?
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced men making comments about women having families before, and it's very inappropriate. It happens. I'm not the first person that's ever experienced anything like that. There's also sort of a senior male to junior female dynamic, which has also been a bit awkward in certain times, where they sort of try to kind of usurp your opinion. And then there's also, at least in some science fields, there are cliques of men where they basically just work together, and there's not a woman that works together in that group. So yeah, I've experienced that. Although we're very fortunate that we have 2 women leading our department, our chair and our vice chair, which is probably unusual, but I really love it.
It is. I come from a very male-oriented department in my postdoc, so seeing this was like, oh wow, I don't used to see that. So but that's not the norm, I would say, usually in all departments.
John, can I add one? This is Nancy Philp, and great talk, Sarah and Veronica. But I think men love to mentor women. So even though when I started out in science many years ago, there weren't that many women, and I sort of fell into it. And I really only realized there was a bias, like the older I got, and then you're the only woman in the room, and people speak over you. And even my daughter, who's an architect, she complains all the time about how in architecture is a male-dominated field and people speak over her. And she said yesterday she was so annoyed. She was speaking and she didn't think anyone was listening, and then she realized her mic was off on the Zoom meeting. So she said, oh, I thought you guys were just being sexist, but really my mic was off. But I think there are some sort of insidious things that I think women need to learn about, and it's asking for things like, I don't ask for things and then, Tukachinsky sends you $5,000 because you're a good citizen, at the end of the year because you're a good citizen. But it's because you're not in the office saying, okay, I have X amount of funding and I need this microscope. So I think, just as you both said, you have to feel secure in your science. You really have to ask for what you need and what you deserve, because men do it with much.
I agree.
Not all of you, all the males on the Zoom too, but I mean, I think men know how to ask for what they need a little better than women. So you really need to ask for what you want and what you need. So sorry to inject.
I think that's a great point. It's totally true. They know what to ask and they get it. That's the thing, because
right, and that
we have a hard time asking for things like, hey, do you mind if I, and then we don't even get it, right? Because we are probably the persistent. We don't want to be too pushy, and it's just hard. The other thing is and I should practice that myself, to call out certain situations in a room, for example, people giving their opinions, you comment on something, nobody seems to pay attention to you, then somebody says the same thing. So
right.
I said that before, but we don't say anything, right? So maybe we should learn as a practice, right? To say, hey, Dr. So-and-so, I actually said that 5 minutes ago. So people pay attention to actually women having a good point on things, and sometimes they are just overlooked because they don't, as you say, it's like they don't listen, but the mic is on in this case, but they are not heard, right? So we have to all try to do something about it, and sometimes just to speak up, right? It's a practice. It takes, I don't do it really well, to admit.
No, but I do think it's key, because there are resources and opportunities
Yeah.
that you don't get. So then it's an uneven playing field.
Yeah, maybe when there is a big meeting, there should be a one-by-one moment and say, okay, now, Dr. So, in order, in a Zoom meeting, what do you have to say? So everybody has a voice. And then maybe when you have the moment of 1 minute for you, maybe they would say something about it. But that would be an option to give opportunities to our voices. Yeah, but that's a good point. I agree.
Anyway, thank you. Great talks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that comment too, Dr. Phil.
Nobody has questions about career transitions? Is everybody going to stay in academia, or you're more thinking, no way?
Oh wait, so I was going to ask before, how did you guys go on about researching when you were switching fields? How did you guys go about researching those different fields, like your subfields, I guess?
Maybe that's a question for Sara, because I didn't switch too much. So I could ask people, hey, I want to continue working on this. What lab do you recommend? So
One of my favorite phrases in science is to follow the science and not the bias. Where you get this preconceived notion about what you expect your data to look like, or where you expect your project to go, or, I just want to work on proteins or genes or this or that. You have to follow the science and where it's leading you. And when you have a gut that says, I think that there's something here from the environment that's feeding back into my system that we're not quite measuring yet, don't be afraid to go and after it. And when I switched fields in order to learn the field and the subfield, like I mentioned, the first national meeting I ever went to in my new field, I was so lost. I felt like I knew nothing. They were speaking in another language. Everything was in acronyms, and I didn't know a single one of them. So really, for me, I think it was getting into that new lab and really getting into the science and lab meeting, actually, and the group meetings that we would have at our institution, where we would have seminar speakers or people like that come out, just really starting to get into the new field and learn and listen and learn. And when you don't understand something the first time, sometimes you pick up on it the next time or the next time, and you'd be surprised as you use it, you learn it. And then, of course, reading papers. There was a lab that I was interviewing at that I wanted to switch to, and he said, when people come to my lab, they spend the first month reading papers, and here's a stack of 60, by the way. So, there's that brute force approach, which for me personally doesn't work that great because I have a hard time retaining things that I read. But I do a much better job of seeing and hearing and doing to help me retain something. So that was really
I would add
time.
here for the postdoc position, it's very important to decide if you want to go to a big lab, very established, or you're okay with a smaller lab, because I think the way these things are managed, it depends. If it's a big lab where the culture is very established, you don't see the PI too much and you're by yourself, or if you prefer like a more nurture environment, that it's more like a small family where you can actually don't be left with a stack of papers by yourself to read. And that's an important decision too, because you may go to a super important big name lab, but be very isolated and the pressure is super high. The reward could be also high, but you cannot be assured of that, right? So that's an important decision. What kind of style of lab you would like to go, I think.
There are big labs that are really interconnected though, and have a lot of really good feedback and communication. And sometimes it's great if you're at a big lab, because then, somebody in the lab sees a paper that you didn't see and they send it to you and say, hey, look at this, so it's kind of like having more eyeballs on a target, which is also kind of cool.
Thank you.
But yeah, picking the size of the lab and the style of lab is important.
I think the culture of the lab, that's a good question to have when you are reaching to labs. And I don't know how you, Sara, approach the search for postdocs, but I was very agnostic, sending emails to people I was interested in their science. And sometimes I got a reply, sometimes I didn't. And that's how I got my interviews. I didn't do it through my advisor. I just email people massively. And one thing, once you get into the interview process, one thing to ask and to sense is that culture. If you feel you fit well in a culture, and ask people about it, that what kind of style you guys have here in the lab, that's important. I think.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I emailed labs that I was interested in their work for postdocs and asked if they were hiring postdocs, which right now, I have to tell you, there's probably not a single lab on the planet that's not hiring postdocs.
Now it's the opposite. I got many emails saying, I'm sorry, I don't have any opening until 2020, whatever, not 2020, 15 or something. I think, oh my goodness, but how is that even possible? And now it's the opposite. Now everybody's looking for postdocs. Something really changed.
Yeah. There's a postdoc drought.
But now is a good moment to go in the postdoc market, really.
Yeah.
All right, one more question, and then I could literally talk all day. But one more question, and then we'll end the meeting. Does anyone besides me and John?
Yeah, I have one question. Was there any reason that either of you decided against going into industry?
I have my personal, since I started, I knew I wanted to be more in the discovery aspect of things. I was very curious about research, scientific research, and cancer research. And I have very many friends that actually after college, they started to go into companies, and after the PhD as well, a lot into medical writing as well. And I just never felt that was for me. I'm not saying it's not going to be in the future, but I had that feeling that I really wanted to be in the lab and have my own way of organizing things, and that constraint of being working for a company, it just doesn't appeal to me. But it's just my personal style. I may like it in the future, but as of now, I knew that I like the freedom you get to do your own thing in your lab, and the risks as well. But every freedom comes with a risk and responsibility. But that's a luxury that I don't know if I would have in a company. And that's something that I don't want to compromise, at least yet. You know.
Yeah, I agree. I wanted the freedom to work on the things that I wanted to work on and explore the science that I wanted to explore. And you know, you can do that in companies. Absolutely, you can do that. But it is in the confines of a specific portfolio that you are designated to, and that portfolio could change at a moment's notice. Due to funding or a drug failing or a drug succeeding or whatever. I also sort of I did explore it a little bit, at least in terms of trying to meet with people that were in different types of industry, small business versus larger business, and even interviewed for one. Actually, I kind of forgot about it. The culture is really different, and the people in my field really pull me along and make me love what I do. I love talking about science with my colleagues and mentors and friends in the field. I love doing that, and I'm not sure what the environment is like in industry, if it feels that friendly and open, but that's something that really draws me to academia.
I think there is also a lot more opportunities now than when I was transitioning to the postdoc and the faculty positions in terms of options in companies. I think now, for whatever reason, I don't know exactly, I see a lot more excitement on PhDs to go quickly to industry. And I think there are a lot more different positions and opportunities to grow than some years ago. That's a feeling I have. So it may be a little different now than when I was in the market. But definitely there are some places that they do research. I just don't know how focused you are on a specific project that you don't decide about, right? So you don't know what's going to happen about it. And at the same time, you don't have that freedom to decide, right? And if you can cope with the instability, because people could argue, yeah, but academia is so unstable, you don't know where you're going to be in the next 5 years. But I don't know if that also applies to industry. You know, all jobs may be temporary, right? So whatever you do, you got to enjoy it, and you have a passion for it. And I live my life as a PI in chapters. So I know the next 5 years, I probably will be here, but I don't know if afterwards I will continue, because it depends on funding and many other things, right? So yeah, that may be a drawback for someone, but for me, it still gains the freedom and the excitement of the discovery and dealing with my own people and trying to convey that to them and see that they get excited. I mean, I don't know if you get that in the industry. Maybe yes, it depends on which one.
But you can still work with industry even if you're in academia too. So it's not like you don't have partnerships and, you know, work together as well. So that's also fun.
Thank you both.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess collaborating with people in industry as well. Vice versa. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for participating and preparing those great PowerPoints and yeah, talking to us today.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks to
Welcome.
you. It was my pleasure. Hopefully it was helpful.
Yeah, very helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
And just to say, people feel free to reach to me, and probably Sarah has the same idea, that if you felt shy to ask something and you want some opinion on something, I'm actually very happy to help. All right.
Yep. Happy to receive any emails.
All right. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Again, thank you.